Kelsey. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I'm doing a little bit of an odd video. As you may remember, last month I spent a week or so back at my parents' house. They live across the country from me, and while I was there, I packed up a large box of books that I had there that I wanted to have here. Largely, these are books from my childhood or my other younger years that I wanted to have here to reread. Every time I visit home, I sort of sort through books and things and get rid of some things that I've decided I don't want and bring some other things back here with me. And I wanted to show you the books that I decided I wanted to bring back here to reread, or in some cases to read for the first time or to just have on my shelves. So I'm going to start with the books that are sort of anomalies for whatever reason, and then I'll get to all of the books from my younger years that I want to reread. The first two are going to be Death at Blenheim Palace and Death on the Lizard, Edwardian Mysteries by Robin Page. These are the final two books in the Victorian Edwardian mystery series that my mom and I have been reading over the course of several years. I feel like this series is going a little bit downhill towards the end, but I'm close enough that I just want to finish it out. And then I will send them back to the other side of the country for my mom to read. The next are three books, not really from my younger years, but from college, which for whatever reason I was keeping back at my parents' house, that I thought, why are these here? They should be at my apartment, and I'm not particularly planning on rereading these anytime in the near future, although I think someday I might, so I'm not getting rid of them, obviously. And this is the Arrows trilogy by Mercedes Lackey. This is, I think, in terms of publication order, the first series in her Valdemar universe. I accidentally started with a different trilogy when I was in college and then went back and read these. And then I tried reading some of her others in this universe, and I got kind of tired of them, and I wasn't liking the sort of spin-off trilogies and other series as much as I liked these. Of the ones I've read, these are, I think, the best. So the first book is Arrows of the Queen, the second is Arrow's Flight, and the third is Arrow's Fall. And I think these have really pretty covers, and I would like to have them in my mass market paperback rotation, because I have this rotation going where I show a different mass market paperback in every video, or at least I try to remember to switch them out, and these are books that I'd like to have here on this shelf for that purpose, if for none other. And then the last book I have that's an anomaly is a book that is not mine. I don't own it. This is a used copy of a book that my dad picked up and then decided he wanted to loan to me because he thought I should read it. And this is Erewhon by Samuel Butler. It's from 1872. My dad thinks I should read this because he thinks it may have been the first ever dystopian novel, or at least a significant landmark in the genre, depending on how you define dystopian novels. He says he was assigned to read this in college, and he thinks I should read it for its literary value. And when someone hands me a book and says, read this, I really can't say no. So I will at some point read this. I haven't done any of my own research into this book, so I don't really know anything about it, so it's going to be an interesting experience. Next, I have a few older sci-fi novels I read when I was younger. The first of these is The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. I don't remember much about this book. I remember I read it, and that's about it. This is the only Ray Bradbury I've read. I read it when I was, I think, too young to fully appreciate its literary value. So I'm looking forward to rereading this and bringing, you know, a more mature SFF reader's eyes to this book. Next, I have a book called Orbital Resonance by John Barnes. This is a sci-fi book from 1991. I believe I was given this book as a young teenager because the protagonist of this book is a young teenager. When I look at Goodreads reviews for it, strangely, people who are readers of John Barnes and his other stuff, the main thing they say about it is oh my goodness, he's writing a teenage girl. I guess that's not what he usually writes or what he's known for writing. But for me, reading this as a teenage girl, that really wasn't significant. And I can't remember much about the themes or what's of interest in this story other than like the teen drama that presumably is like the trappings of the story. Presumably there's something more important going on. I remember the teen drama. I liked the teen drama enough when I was a young teenager that I think I read this 2 or 3 times. I'm gonna have to see how this holds up. I think this is the type of sci-fi where, you know, there's some sort of artificially structured society on a space station after Earth has been destroyed. In my mind, this was really confused with Rite of Passage before I reread Rite of Passage earlier this year, so I don't know if there are actual real similarities between those 2 books, or if I was just mixing them up in my mind because they're 2 sci-fi books I read as a teenager about teenage girls. And then the last of 3 older sci-fi books I have here is Asimov's Mysteries. This is a collection of short science fiction mysteries by Isaac Asimov. I had thought for a long time that this was the only book by Asimov I had ever read. It turned out I was wrong because a conversation recently reminded me that when I was a rather young kid, my aunt loaned me the Lucky Star Space Ranger books, which I did not realize were written by Isaac Asimov, but they were. But yeah, I guess I haven't read any of his like real classic books. I've read this collection of mysteries a couple times when I was younger. I reread like all of my books all the time when I was a kid. What I remember from this collection is that I really liked Pâté de Foie Gras, which is about a literal goose laying a golden egg and a team of scientists trying to figure out how it's doing this. That's all it is. And I remember viscerally hating I'm in Marsport Without Hilda, which is supposed to be a romance, but really isn't at all. It's just yucky. And then I have just about no memory of any of the other stories in this collection. So I'm gonna see if there are any others that stand out to me on a reread someday when I reread this, and maybe I'll read something else by Asimov. I don't know, do you have any recommendations? Next, I've got a batch of other books I remember really liking as a kid. The first is Wise Child by Monica Furlong. This is one I think I only ever read once, so I don't remember it that clearly. I don't remember when I came to own it or under what circumstances. I know there's also a sequel to this book and a prequel, and I think I read both of those in high school. I think I must have read this before I was in high school, but I remember getting those 2 from my high school library. This is about a girl called Wise Child who's like raised or apprenticed by a healer or sorceress named Juniper. And I don't remember which things I remember about these books are about this one, and which things I remember about these books are about the other 2. The next book I've got here is Fire Gold by Dia Calhoun. I think of her mostly as a young adult author I really liked when I was younger. Most of her books are out of print now, I think, though. But I think of this book as a middle grade book. I don't remember the age of the protagonist, so I don't know if that's a good assessment or not, but I remember this being a pretty straightforward kid on a magical adventure story, and I remember loving it when I was younger, and I think I read it several times. So now I have this one, Aria of the Sea, which I also have to reread, and The Phoenix Dance, which I have recently reread here in New York. And the only 2 of hers that I have back in Seattle that I haven't decided the fate on yet are Aviel of Rhea and White Midnight, which I remember not liking as much as the 3 that I have here right now. The next one I've got is The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle by Avi or Avi. I guess I never really knew how to pronounce this author's name. Do you know? I don't know. He was one of my favorite authors as a kid, though, so it's surprisingly embarrassing that I'm not sure how this is pronounced. I read this book so many times as a kid, and I had forgotten how badly water damaged my copy is, so maybe I should have just gotten rid of this one and started looking for a new copy, but I do really want to reread this because I don't remember it as clearly as I want to, given how many times I read it and how much it was one of my favorite books as a kid. This isn't fantasy or sci-fi or anything though, this is just like adventures on the high seas. The next book I've got here is The Arcadians by Lloyd Alexander. This is the only book of his I read as a kid. I just wasn't aware of his other books, and I read this a couple of times. I think I might have been given this as a gift in middle school or something, and it wasn't until I was all grown up, I think graduated from college, before I became aware of all of Lloyd Alexander's other books, and I read his Westmark trilogy, one of which is right here. And having read and loved those relatively recently, in the past few years, made me want to go back and reread this one to see how it compares. The next book I have is The Two Princesses of Bamar by Gail Carson Levine. I loved Ella Enchanted as a kid, and I think it's fairly common for people who loved Ella Enchanted to sort of come to the consensus that none of Gail Carson Levine's other books were quite as good. That one just seems to be the classic book that none of the others are going to live up to, even though she's still writing and she's very prolific. And, you know, I loved Ella Enchanted, and that was the book that I read over and over and over, but this one I remember also really liking. I think I read this one a couple of times, and I saw recently that there's apparently a prequel book set in this same world that's coming out sometime this year, and that just sort of made me remember this book and made me think that I wanted to reread this book. Okay, next I have two books that are SFF children's classics that I did not like as a kid. And the only reason that I still own these copies, that my family still owns these copies, is because they are old classics, and these are actually, I think, copies of these books that are from my parents' childhoods. So that's why they're still in the family. That's why we didn't get rid of them when I didn't like them. But you guys are going to be incredulous, I think, at this, because the first is going to be The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I was not into Oz as a kid. I was into Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass in terms of classic portal fantasies. Those were the ones I really liked. I was not into Oz, and I was not into Narnia. I saw the movie like once. I think I thought it was okay, but reading a whole lot more of today's portal fantasy recently that harkens back to all of these classic books made me want to revisit this. I think my parents read this aloud to me when I was like too young to be reading to myself, and I think we made it through maybe the first two books in the series. We certainly have several of them, but I don't think we made it through all of them because I don't think I was into it. But this is a beautiful old vintage edition with like color illustrations and everything. So this should be, you know, a good classic reading experience. And then the next one that I remember really disliking as a kid, although I can't quite remember why, is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. This is another children's SFF classic, and I don't remember why I viscerally disliked this as a small child, but I did. So I'll read it again and see what I think now. And then I only have one more book here. This one is a book that I was given as a gift by one of my teachers for my middle school graduation. This is Wonder Tales, 6 French Stories of Enchantment, edited with an introduction by Marina Warner. And these all have different translators. This is a collection of fairy tales, specifically from 17th century France, court of Louis XIV, that sort of thing. I think this might have been my first introduction to like real adult fairy tales that hadn't been tamed down for children. And so they stuck with me, I think, in part because I didn't quite know how to process them. I didn't quite have the historical context, but I was intrigued. And part of the reason I really want to reread this now is because last year I read Bitter Greens by Kate Forsyth, which is a lot about fairy tales in this same time period in France. And one of the stories that's in this book that I remembered from this book was mentioned in that book. I think that one was Bearskin. So what's in this book is the white cat The Subtle Princess, Bearskin, The Counterfeit Marquise, Starlight, and The Great Green Worm. So I really want to reread these now that I have a bunch more fairy tale history context in which to put them. So here are all the books that I brought back with me from my parents' house, plus the 3 that I already put on the shelf. Let me know what you think of these books. Let me know if you read any of these as a kid, or if you think that I should really prioritize some of these for a reread. I don't really know how I'm planning on shuffling any of these into my reading schedule right now. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. Leave comments about books. Bye for now.